Ken, you're a 21-year veteran of the United States Navy, retired Master Chief Petty Officer, so that is no small thing. How'd you do it?
It's a great question. I was a bomb disposal guy in the Navy, and I spent, about half of my career doing traditional Navy bomb disposal work, and then another half of my career supporting special operations units. And I left the Navy, with a little bit of bitterness. I left at 21 years. I had this whole plan to do 30. And because of that little bit of bitterness, I think it helped me from having to look back. And don't get me wrong. I mean, all during the war, I ran a business that helped soldiers and Marines and, Navy guys and airmen going into combat. And I felt like I never really left the community that I was a part of. And I think that helped a lot. But, I'm a long way away from that now. This month, actually, I've been out of the Navy as long as I was in it. And there's not a day that goes by. I tell people all the time, the U.S. Navy made me the man I am. I had a great family, a great father, but at the end of the day, I left home when I was 19 years old, and the Navy had a lot to do with the way I am. So I miss it. I have a lot of love for the military and what the military does for this country. But I never felt like it defined me, and I was able to find that next thing and that next purpose, and Boulder Crest has been a big part of that for me.
What is Boulder Crest?
So Boulder Crest, if I go back a little bit in time, my wife and I early in the war started a charity. Today is known as the EOD Warrior Foundation. And EOD is bomb disposal, as you know, Jesse, explosive ordnance disposal. And that charity is still running. I'm not involved with it anymore. I had termed out of my slot as the board chairman, but we founded that organization. And for about almost 15 years, we helped all the severely injured EOD guys and gals, physically injured primarily, and most of the ones who had been medevaced back to the hospitals here in D.C. Well, in 2013, we had the worst year in Afghanistan for EOD amputees. I think for the service in general, but for the EOD community specifically. And I had retired by then, and my wife and I started bringing families of these severely wounded guys out to our home. We live in Bluemont, Virginia, about an hour west of D.C. And we had a big house with 200 acres of land, and we could just see the joy that getting away from the hospital was doing for these families. And I came home one night, and my wife and a couple of her friends had this idea to donate 37 acres of our land and build this beautiful facility. And it's the nation's first privately funded wellness center for combat veterans and their families. And a couple of years ago, we included first responders in the mix. But it's a beautiful place. Our largest donor here in Virginia was a man named Mr. Jim Clark. And when Mr. Clark passed away, his family gave us $10 million, and we opened up a second facility in southern Arizona. And then with the help of many philanthropists, including the two founders of the Home Depot, Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank, we've been scaling the work we do at Boulder Crest out all over the nation. So, really what Boulder Crest is it's a movement to change the way veterans and first responders get mental health care. And it's based on the science of something called post-traumatic growth. At the highest level, basically that means what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and that we have to do certain things to make sure that does come to fruition. So that's what Boulder Crest is. It's kind of a place, but really, I think at the end of the day, Jesse, at this point, 12 years into this, I think it's really becoming a movement to change the way the mental health care is done, for our brothers and sisters.
I love that. I love that so much. So what do you do for them at Boulder Crest? You just chuck them a bottle of pills like the VA?
No, matter of fact, we're pretty anti-pharmaceutical, but, there are some pharmaceuticals I think that, people end up on just because they have to. But at the end of the day, I was telling somebody the other day, I think 6 of the 8 antidepressants have suicide as a side effect. And, I'm not a mental health professional, although some days I feel like one. I'm really, a bomb disposal guy, and to try to rationalize why somebody who was depressed would put a pill into their body to make them more depressed. It just has never sat well with me. But, what we try to do is incorporate the science of post-traumatic growth, which is best understood in my mind, militarily wise, by the prisoners of war from Vietnam. I think that story really resonates with, our brothers and sisters. If you think about 550 years ago, 591 men released from the Hanoi Hilton who came back to this country, their families were told to be prepared to institutionalize them after their captivity. These men came back and have become the most remarkable men in the world. And this is a story of post-traumatic growth, that trauma, deep trauma, can be overcome, and you can go on to do some amazing things. And we see that story over and over with prisoners of war. And that's really what we do, is really, Stockdale, Jim Stockdale, who was a commander at the time, a retired Navy admiral, his message to prisoners of war was return with hope. And that's really, and return with honor. And that's really what Boulder Crest is all about. In our garden, there's a quote from Thucydides, who was an Athenian war general, and it says that we must remember that one man is much the same as another, but he is best who is trained in the severest of schools, and the severest of school being combat. And it's powerful, right? And I believe that. I believe that men and women who fight for this country are forged on the battlefield. But when you come home, Sebastian Junger wrote about it in his book Tribe, that it's not what you're coming home from, it's what you're coming home to, this disconnected society and the loss of brotherhood and sisterhood. And that's really what we try to put back together at Boulder Crest through these innovative programs.
How do people give to Operation Struggle? How do people give if they want to give? Because I get emails every single day. Jesse, how do I help? How do I help? I talked about veterans last night and veteran suicide on my show. Jesse, how do I do something about it? How do they help? People want to help.
Well, I tell people all the time, there's kind of three ways to help. The first way is just to share the news, right? I mean, there's a lot of people in this country that can't afford to give money or their time, but they can afford to share the word and to help spread the commercials, spread the website through your network. I think that's a big way of helping nonprofits. The second way is to volunteer. I mean, every nonprofit, including Boulder Crest, needs help. And we have volunteers at the individual level, at the corporate level, and they do some amazing things for us. And volunteering not only is good for the organization, but it's good for you as an individual. And then thirdly, is to donate money. I mean, it's every penny that comes into this organization is important, and it gets spent on the men and women who we put through the training. So whether it's $10 or $10 million, it's a big help to this organization to make sure that we can do what we're doing, because everything we do here at Boulder Crest is free of charge. I had a friend of mine, just to sidetrack a minute, a friend of mine, a Navy SEAL that I had served with, called me the other day. He had one of his sailors that needed some help. And he said, well, how much does it cost? And I said, it's free. And he said, what do you mean it's free? But it is. That's, thanks to the generosity of this country and our donors. Everything we do at Boulder Crest is free to our participants.
I love that. BoulderCrest.org if you're interested in helping, putting your money where your morals are, as I like to say. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Ken.
Support the First TV today and get instant access to exclusive specials like Who is Ron DeSantis, the history of FBI scandals, and America's worst presidents. Visit thefirsttv.com/support or download the First TV app to become a supporter and start watching today.